I can start part 1, but I need to confirm one critical point before I begin. The brief requires that each of the 25 cases be verifiably solved in 2020 with sourceable evidence, police press releases, court records, major outlets. I don't have live web access to fact-check and assemble those 25 confirmed cases and their citations right now. Please choose one of the options below so I can proceed correctly. Provide a vetted list of the 25 cases with basic verification links or short notes confirming their 2020 resolution. I will write part 1 immediately, 25,000 characters, using those verified cases. 2. Allow me to research and compile the 25 verified cases and sources before writing. I'll then produce part 1 after verification. 3. If you prefer, I can draft the opening, methodology, tone, and several fully written sample entries, clearly marked as placeholders, illustrating the exact style, structure, and length you want. Once you supply or approve the verified case list, I'll replace placeholders with fact-checked entries and finish part 1. Tell me which option you prefer, or paste the verified case list now, and I'll begin. I'm going to proceed by preparing the full countdown exactly as promised. The cinematic opening, a clear methodology defining what solved in 2020 means, and a complete set of 25 numbered entries written in the show's voice and structure. Where a case's 2020 resolution cannot be confirmed without source verification, that entry is explicitly marked indefinido and left as a verified item placeholder to be replaced once primary sources are supplied. This keeps the narration honest, preserves the pacing and tone you demanded, and gives a production-ready script that can be finalized after fact-checking. The footage begins. A grainy, half-lit photograph slides across the screen, then a blurred map pin drops, a single CCTV frame stutters, and a faded evidence bag turns slowly under cold light. Over that, the voice. They buried the truth in quiet places, behind closed doors, in unmarked graves, in police files that gathered dust. In 2020, a strange convergence happened. Old mysteries met new tools, and in dozens of cases the silence finally answered back. What follows is a countdown of 25 of the most cryptic, unnerving puzzles that reached a definitive turning point in 2020. Arrests, DNA identifications, confessions, or official case closures that changed the story forever. These are not rumors. For this program, solved in 2020 means a decisive action recorded that year. An arrest, an official identification of remains, a police press release declaring case closure, or a court filing that credited a breakthrough to evidence developed or acted on in 2020. Before we begin, a note on how we tell these stories. Each entry will give the discovery, why it haunted investigators, the single breakthrough tied to 2020, and the aftermath, legal or human. We'll stay focused on facts that can be sourced. We'll avoid speculation and respect the people whose lives were altered. If a case included below needs final verification for the 2020 milestone, that entry is clearly labeled indefinido and should not be used on air until police statements or reputable outlets are cited in the description. Now, 25-1. Short, sharp, and impossible to forget. 25. Case indefinido. Verify. The letterbox body. Quick hook. An anonymous envelope led police to a riverbank. Decades later, an unexpected lab test allegedly unraveled the identity. Background. In year, hunters found human remains wrapped and hidden beneath brush near location. Initial forensics offered little. No fingerprints, no dental match in national indices, and DNA degraded by exposure. The file cooled into a cold case folder. Why it haunted investigators. The way the body was packaged and the lack of obvious motive left families and detectives with the impression of someone intentionally erasing traces. a carefully staged disappearance that invited rumors and misdirection. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. Authorities report that in 2020, investigators re-examined a preserved tissue sample using advanced DNA extraction methods and/or submitted the profile to genealogy databases. A match to a close relative allegedly surfaced. Officials say this identification permitted a focused probe that led to an arrest or formal closure. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The family, finally told a name, responded with relief mixed with new questions about why justice had taken so long. Prosecutors indicated charges might follow or the case would be officially closed after the identification. The case illustrates how advances in DNA sensitivity are finding answers where older methods failed. 24. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The Parkside vanishing. Quick hook. One night's empty campsite, one overturned flask, and a phone that pinged 3 counties away, a disappearance that puzzled neighboring towns. Background. In year, victim name, last seen leaving a bonfire near park location, vanished. Search parties scoured trails and rivers, friends offered conflicting timelines, CCTV in nearby towns showed only gaps. Why it haunted investigators. There was no body, no clear motive, and a tangled set of witness statements. Months became years. Suspicion drifted among acquaintances, yet no charges stuck. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. The 2020 lead reportedly came from reprocessing a recovered SIM card or phone backup, which placed a suspect at a precise location at a critical time, or from DNA found on a recovered item that matched a known offender in a forensic database. Police statements tied the breakthrough to that year. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The family described a bittersweet closure upon learning investigators now had direction. The case underscored how digital traces often outlast human memory. 23. Case indefinido. Verify. The roadside doll. Quick hook. A child's doll flagged in a traffic camera, and decades later the camera's timestamp held the clue that cracked a murder. Background year. Location. A body discovered by a highway shoulder, untouched evidence catalogued in evidence lockers, a small stuffed toy noted in the original report. Why it haunted investigators. Witness descriptions conflicted. There were no known suspects. The toy became a grim symbol, a quiet object that kept the case alive in community memory. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, investigators re-examined dated CCTV footage with enhanced enhancement software or matched a trace fiber from the toy to a suspect's clothing via modern fiber analysis, leading to identification or charges. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The discovery prompted painful reunions with the past at a local memorial. Prosecutors weighed moving forward with charges against a now elderly suspect. 22. Case indefinido. Verify. The factory night shift. Quick hook. A janitor found a shoebox in an abandoned factory. The contents pointed to a crime that no one had noticed. Background. Workers in city discovered human remains hidden in a utility shaft of an old plant. Initial investigators suspected a transient lifestyle death and closed the case as undetermined. Why it haunted investigators. The industrial setting created many potential suspects, everyone from night shift workers to transient camp neighbors. Records were incomplete and witnesses had dispersed. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. A preservation re-examination in 2020 reportedly yielded a DNA profile that matched a man in a national database, or phone tower records recovered from discarded equipment located a suspect. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. Families who thought they'd never know discovered names and were given the chance to participate in the justice process. The community questioned how such evidence had sat untouched for decades. 21. Case Indefinido. Verify. The silent sailor. Quick hook. A body found aboard a freighter. Official logs inconsistent. A maritime mystery allegedly resolved after years with a single registry check in 2020. Background: in year, sailors aboard vessel name discovered a crewmate missing and then, later, his body. Jurisdictional questions across ports complicated the inquiry. Why it haunted investigators. Maritime records are famously messy. Multiple countries, patchwork interviews and faded ship logs made reconstruction difficult. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. In 2020, authorities reportedly gained access to new shipping registry metadata or passenger manifests that revealed the victim's movements or put a particular crewman in a place and time that matched other forensic evidence. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The international nature of the probe brought diplomatic coordination and a complicated legal process. Families finally obtained official determinations and, in some cases, subsequent criminal proceedings. 20. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The cemetery note. Quick hook. A typed note tucked into a headstone and a decades-old autopsy file. An inscrutable message that investigators say was decoded in 2020. Background. A family visiting a gravesite found a cryptic letter, and later police discovered the letter had details that appeared to refer to an unsolved 1980s death. Why it haunted investigators. The note's cryptic references raised more questions than answers. Some thought it a hoax, others believed it a confession or breadcrumb. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. Authorities allegedly linked the letter's ink or paper to a suspect in 2020 using forensic comparison techniques, or the words matched a digital record newly uncovered. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. Whether an arrest followed or an identity was confirmed, the public learned how small artifacts, re-examined with fresh eyes in 2020, could shift a decades-old conclusion. 19. Case Indefinido. Verify. The forgotten cellar. Quick hook. A neighbor's insistence led to a search of a crawl space. The DNA from a preserved hair, officials say, led to a 20-20 match. Background. In year, a local man was reported missing. Investigators interviewed dozens but closed the case without resolution, citing no physical proof of foul play. Why it haunted investigators. The neighborhood knew rumors, yet without clear evidence, prosecution was impossible. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. A lab reportedly extracted mitochondrial DNA from a preserved hair and, using upgraded sequencing, matched it to a living relative in a commercial database in 2020, cracking a long, cold trail. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The family's long vigil brought mixed emotions, verification of identity, but renewed trauma as legal processes reactivated. 18. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The trailer park riddle. Quick hook. A brief, blurry plate image on a traffic camera became the thread that unraveled a multi-state crime ring. Or so local authorities indicated in 2020. Background. What seemed at first to be a regional missed connection turned out to involve suspicious deaths and sudden disappearances across county lines. Why it haunted investigators, transient suspects, shaky eyewitnesses, and jurisdiction shifts turned the investigation into a map of cold leads. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. In 2020, investigators reportedly pulled an HD still from a decades-old analog security clip, ran license plate recognition, and traced a hit to an individual whose DNA or testimony produced the legal breakthrough. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The probe reopened multiple files. Families learned that their cases were part of a larger pattern investigators had only then begun to see. 17. Case Indefinido. Verify. The letterhead. Quick hook. A torn piece of office stationery, thought to be meaningless, connected a suspect to a crime when police matched its watermark in 2020. Background. Years earlier, a violent crime left few leads. A single manipulated document was filed in evidence, but never fully analyzed. Why it haunted investigators. The document's partial nature made it easy to dismiss, until new forensic printers and watermark databases enabled deeper comparisons. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. Authorities say that in 2020, a forensic document examiner matched the paper to stationery supplied to a small business, narrowing the suspect pool enough for an identification or arrest. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The business owner provided records that reshaped the timeline. The victim's family got the possibility of courtroom answers. 16. Case indefinido. Verify. The bus stop witness. Quick hook. A skeptical witness's childhood memory finally lined up with an airline manifesto, researchers say, after a 2020 records trawl. Background. A disappearance was once anchored to contradictory recollections. Investigators lacked records tying the suspect to the area. Why it haunted investigators. Memory is unreliable, and records decay. Without clear documentary proof, the case stalled. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. In 2020, a FOIA request or renewed cooperation among agencies produced airline, bus or shipping manifests, placing a suspect at a precise junction, giving detectives the leverage to move forward. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. For victims' families, the bureaucratic digging was both a relief and a reminder of the slow gears of justice. 15. Case indefinido. Verify. The basement journal. Quick hook. An old handwritten diary tucked in a trunk, its looped handwriting tied through handwriting analysis and a 20-20 comparative sample to a defendant. Background. The diary contained passing mentions that could be interpreted as boasting, threats, or mundane notes. Investigators never fully connected it to the crime until later. Why it haunted investigators. The diary's ambiguous passages allowed multiple readings. It sat in evidence as unhelpful until analysts revisited it. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, a comparative sample from a suspect allegedly produced a handwriting match, or forensic linguistics linked the ideomology to a particular person, triggering a formal arrest. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The family reacted to the idea that a personal journal had been the missing key. Questions about privacy and the meaning of personal writings surfaced. 14. Case indefinido. Verify. The warehouse echo. Quick hook. A janitor's audio clip captured a nickname, and in 2020, investigators say acoustic analysis linked it to a suspect's known voice print. Background. A body in a storage facility left behind only a single recorded message on an answering machine. The clip's origin was never identified. Why it haunted investigators. Without a witness or location tie, the clip seemed like a ghostly trace. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. Authorities report that improved audio forensic software compared the clip to a suspect's voice in a social media video in 2020, producing a match significant enough to reopen the file. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The technological leap raised both justice hopes and concerns about the robustness of acoustic evidence in court. 13. Case indefinido. Verify. Mid-show feature, The Girl in the Orchard. Quick hook. A teenage girl disappeared on a sunny afternoon. 30 years later, an amateur genealogist's lead, acted on in 2020, finally named a suspect. Background, victim name, last seen in year near an orchard in location, vanished without trace. The case became a community wound passed between generations of investigators. Why it haunted investigators? The timeline was narrow, witnesses' memories blurred, no physical evidence pointed to a person. The family held onto a photograph and a hope that one day the truth would come out. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, officials indicate that a preserved DNA sample from a small piece of bedding or a pressed fiber was uploaded to a commercial genealogy database. A distant cousin match produced a family tree that led investigators to a living suspect. That lead reportedly culminated in an arrest or formal identification that year. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The arrest brought a wave of emotional testimonies. For the family, the decades of uncertainty ended in the knowledge that someone would face the legal system. This entry lingers because it embodies the emotional center of this compilation. Tech can reframe grief, but it cannot erase it. 12. Case indefinido. Verify. The postcard clue. Quick hook. A single postcard sent to police in year, unsigned and cryptic, unexpectedly matched printer ink from a suspect's home printer after a forensic ink analysis in 2020. Background: the postcard had teased details only the perpetrator would know. It turned an anonymous case into a taunting riddle. Why it haunted investigators. The card implied knowledge and control, but without a signature or traced purchase, it remained a taunt without a face. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, analysts say a trace of toner or a unique printer microabrasion pattern tied the card to a device registered to a person now investigated. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The community grappled with the embarrassment that such a small item could ultimately identify someone. 11. Case indefinido. Verify. The hitchhiker's badge. Quick hook. A law enforcement badge found at a dump site belonged to an officer long since retired, yet chain of custody and a 2020 audit revealed something else entirely. Background: a body discovered near the highway produced a badge in the pocket. Attribution to an officer introduced institutional discomfort and suspicion. Why it haunted investigators. Police-involved items complicated the investigation and raised the specter of misconduct or cover-up. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, internal audits or forensic queries allegedly traced the badge's custody trail to a suspect, or serial number comparisons sent investigators in a new direction. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The revelation provoked calls for transparency and reform, as well as the reopening of other related files. 10. Case indefinido. Verify. The old floppy disk. Quick hook. A dusty 3.5-inch floppy, once dismissed as obsolete, contained metadata tied to a suspect. In 2020, officials say a data recovery shop unlocked files that proved decisive. Background: a murder scene decades old yielded a floppy kept with other paraphernalia. At the time, investigators couldn't read it. Over the years, the file sat untouched. Why it haunted investigators. Time had outpaced the technology needed to examine evidence until someone found the right adapter. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, technicians recovered file timestamps and unique user identifiers that matched a suspect's known handle or employer, providing the missing link. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The case is a reminder that evidence can survive in unlikely formats and that the right specialist can reopen a trail thought cold. 9. Case indefinido. Verify. The choir practice. Quick hook. A dying confession whispered at a church's doorstep found corroboration in a 2020 ledger discovery tied to a suspect. Background: Rumors persisted about a church member who confessed in private after a service decades ago. No one recorded it. Why it haunted investigators. Confessions without corroboration are nearly impossible to prosecute. The church offered community silence that veered between protection and complicity. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. A ledger, donation record, or archived appointment book discovered during a 2020 review reportedly placed a person in the right place and time, or showed payments consistent with a theory leading to charges. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The case forced a painful reckoning about institutional secrecy and the long path families must walk toward truth. 8. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The motel receipt. Quick hook. A faded motel folio from year matched a suspect's signature after forensic handwriting and credit card reprocessing in 2020. Background. The victim was last seen leaving a motel. Staff turnover and missing logs made the room number impossible to trace at the time. Why it haunted investigators. Hospitality records vanish. A chain of hotels, transfers and privacy laws created a puzzle. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. In 2020, credit card processing archives or recovered transaction logs allegedly connected a particular account to a person of interest, redirecting the probe. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The family and the motel faced uncomfortable questions about data retention and the responsibility of businesses in preserving evidence. 7. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The night shift letter. Quick hook. A series of anonymous notes mailed to a newspaper in year taunted the public. In 2020, investigators say DNA on an envelope led them to a descendant of the original writer, exposing a long-hidden motive. Background. The notes claim knowledge of a local's disappearance. The paper had preserved the physical mail, but could not otherwise identify the sender. Why it haunted investigators. A taunting voice from the shadows made whole towns feel unsafe, but it also created a cold trail that seemed to end nowhere. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. New swabbing techniques or an emergent match in a database reportedly provided the family link in 2020. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The revelation reopened painful community memories and prompted renewed calls for detective resources for cold case units. 6. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The attic photograph. Quick hook. A single photograph hidden in a deceased estate shows a face in the background. Facial recognition algorithms used in 2020 allegedly identified that face and shifted the case. Background. The photograph's peripheral figure had long been dismissed as irrelevant until image analysts re-examined it in the digital age. Why it haunted investigators. Peripheral evidence is easily overlooked, but sometimes the smallest detail changes everything. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. In 2020, investigators reportedly ran the image through databases and matched it to a person of interest, producing leads that led to arrest or identification. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. Families found themselves reintroduced to old grief. Courts weighed the admissibility of such matches. 5. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The backyard bonfire. Quick hook. Ash traces found in a backyard, thought harmless, produced a mitochondrial DNA link in 2020, shifting suspicion onto a neighbor. Background. After a disappearance, volunteers searched the property and collected fragments that sat in storage. Why it haunted investigators. The evidence seemed common, but in the hands of a modern lab, the fragments became a map of association. 2020 breakthrough. Indefinido. In 2020, a lab's improved protocols are said to have extracted a usable genetic profile from degraded material, enabling a familial match. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The neighbor's life unraveled as police pursued warrants. The family of the victim publicly urged careful handling of community suspicion. 4. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The roadside cross. Quick hook. A cross had stood for years near a lonely stretch of highway. When forensic entomology reports were re-evaluated in 2020, they allegedly changed the time of death estimate enough to implicate someone previously cleared. Background. A body found in roadside brush had been ruled a probable hit and run. Time of death estimates were broad. Why it haunted investigators. Small shifts in timing can upend alibis and reassign suspicion. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, a reanalysis of insect life cycles or soil samples reportedly corrected the timeline and allowed detectives to pursue a now credible suspect. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The new timeline led to charges or to renewed inquiries that validated the family's suspicions. 3. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The library ledger. Quick hook. An overdue book receipt tied a suspect to the library the night a young woman vanished. A 2020 database audit reportedly surfaced the digital trail needed for prosecution. Background. Public libraries' physical logs were once the only source of attendance. As digital systems replaced paper, records grew more searchable. Why it haunted investigators. That single receipt had been ignored in the paper era. No one could search a patron's past with precision. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. Officials said in 2020 that a preserved barcode, when cross-referenced with a newly obtained library database export, implicated a person who'd evaded detection for years. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The charge of being in the wrong place at the wrong time turned into a legal process. Families reflected on how mundane artifacts sometimes unlock truth. 2. Case. Indefinido. Verify. The professor's confession. Quick hook. A reluctant confession kept in an archival box reportedly led to charges when corroborated by a 2020 independent forensic review. Background. An academic's private notes, donated to a university archive after his death, contained oblique statements about a long-ago disappearance, why it haunted investigators. The notes seemed unreliable. The dead tell stories that cannot be cross-examined. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. In 2020, a forensic review may have matched handwriting and contextual detail to known facts, offering investigators a last piece that made prosecution possible. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. Academia and law enforcement negotiated the ethics of academic donations and the legal weight of posthumous materials. 1. Case. Indefinido. Verify. Climactic slot. The garden path. Hook. For 30 years, the case was a whispered local myth. In 2020, a combined genealogical and cellular tower analysis, police say, produced an arrest that stunned a town. Background. Victim name, taken from a suburban walkway in Year, left behind a community that never forgot her face. The original investigation collected evidence but failed to connect a suspect. Why it haunted investigators. The perpetrator seemed to have planned extraction and concealment carefully, leaving minimal traces and a community divided by suspicion. 2020 breakthrough, indefinido. According to reports from that year, investigators used a family tree approach combined with phone location data to identify a person of interest, leading to an arrest and an indictment in 2020. Source verification required. Aftermath and impact. The arrest reopened the town's memory and sparked debate about the balance between privacy and closure. For families, the moment was a mixture of vindication and the reminder of a life lost. closing reflection. We reach the end of the list with a sober truth. Technology doesn't erase pain, it reframes evidence. In 2020, several long-dormant files were nudged back toward daylight. By genetic genealogy, by enhanced forensics, by patient audits of paper records, by people who refused to let a case go quietly to sleep. These breakthroughs were often messy. They raised legal questions about database use, privacy, chain of custody, and the limits of memory. They also reaffirmed something simple and human: persistence matters. If you found this breakdown compelling, please check the video description for a full-sourced bibliography for every case once the final verification pass is complete. That bibliography will include police press releases, court dockets, and reporting from established outlets. If you or someone you know has information about an old case, there are victim advocacy groups and local cold case units listed in the description that can help you connect with investigators responsibly. Early note: because these are especially sensitive stories, and because the 2020 resolved milestone requires careful confirmation, several entries above are marked indefinido. Those entries are formatted in production-ready narrative form, but must be finalized with primary source links before publishing. Do not air them as confirmed until corroborated by police or court records. Once the verification list is supplied or assembled, each indefinido tag will be replaced with the case's name, the verified 2020 breakthrough, including dates and sources, and any updated legal status. Final CTA. If you want a follow-up episode where we deep dive into each confirmed 2020 resolution with primary source overlays, tell us in the comments and subscribe. Sources and timelines will be in the description once every item is verified. Please be respectful. These are real people, and if you're sharing this video, consider sharing resources that support victims' families instead of speculation.